Hollywood dreams big, but sometimes those dreams become financial nightmares. Did you know that the beloved Christmas classic It's a Wonderful Life originally tanked so hard it bankrupted its studio? Or that one film was so radioactive it killed half its cast and crew? These box office disasters didn't just flop, they obliterated entire companies and ended careers overnight. Heaven's Gate, 1980. Michael Cimino had just won 5 Oscars for The Deer Hunter, so United Artists basically handed him a blank check. Big mistake. This Western epic was supposed to rival Gone with the Wind, but instead killed an entire studio. Cimino went completely power mad, demanding up to 50 takes for simple scenes and rebuilding entire sets because they didn't look right. By the time he was done, he'd shot a ridiculous 220 hours of footage, and the budget had exploded from $7.5 million to a massive $44 million. The final cut was a nearly 4-hour snooze fest that critics absolutely destroyed. Roger Ebert called it the most scandalous cinematic waste I've ever seen. The film made just $3.5 million, and United Artists collapsed under the weight of this disaster. Overnight, Cimino went from Oscar-winning genius to Hollywood's most hated director. The same industry that had worshipped him now blamed him for ending New Hollywood's golden era. His career never recovered. By the 90s, he was directing low-budget flops nobody saw, and when he died in 2016, he'd become a complete recluse. The film that was supposed to be his masterpiece became his tombstone. Cutthroat Island, 1995. This pirate disaster sank so spectacularly that Guinness World Records named it the biggest box office bomb ever. Coralco Pictures bet everything on this swashbuckling adventure starring Gina Davis and directed by Rennie Harlin. The production was pure chaos from day one. The original male lead, Michael Douglas, quit before filming started. Then came the endless rewrites. Harlan even spent $1 million of his own money trying to salvage the script. The budget spiraled to $98 million, and Coralco was already drowning in debt. On set, Harlan fired his chief camera operator, causing 24 crew members to quit in protest. Gina Davis wanted out too, but her contract wouldn't let her escape this sinking ship. When it finally limped into theaters, audiences couldn't have cared less. It didn't even crack the domestic top 10 on opening weekend. The final tally? A pathetic $10 million worldwide against that massive budget. Coralco filed for bankruptcy, and Hollywood became so traumatized by the experience that no studio would touch pirate movies for almost a decade. It took Pirates of the Caribbean in 2003 to finally break the curse. As for Harlan and Davis, their careers nosedived and their marriage fell apart shortly after. One movie managed to sink a studio, a genre, and a marriage all at once. Battlefield Earth, 2000. John Travolta called this Scientology disaster the Schindler's List of sci-fi right before it sank a studio into fraud investigations and bankruptcy. This was Travolta's passion project, his big love letter to Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard's novel. He was so convinced it would be a hit that he personally invested $5 million and declared it's like Star Wars but better. The film cost a ridiculous $73 million and looked like it was shot by aliens who'd never seen a human movie before. Every scene was filmed at a bizarre Dutch angle. The makeup looked like Halloween costumes, and the dialogue was so awful the screenwriter later publicly apologized for writing it. Critics were merciless. Roger Ebert put it on his most hated list, calling it not merely bad, it's unpleasant in a hostile way. The financial damage was catastrophic. It lost $44 million at the box office. But that wasn't even the worst part. Franchise Pictures, the studio behind it, got sued for fraud because they had inflated the budget numbers to trick investors. That lawsuit destroyed the company completely. Barry Pepper, who starred in it, later admitted he only took the role because he thought working with Travolta would be good for his career. Instead, he won a Razzie for Worst Supporting Actor. Sometimes the biggest disasters come from the biggest egos. One from the Heart, 1982, Francis Ford Coppola defined 70s cinema with masterpieces like The Godfather and Apocalypse Now. Then the 80s happened and Coppola's first film of the decade bankrupted his own studio. One from the Heart was a visually stunning Vegas-set musical that absolutely nobody wanted to see. Coppola went completely overboard, pouring $27 million into pioneering visual techniques and building an entire Las Vegas recreation on a studio lot. The movie was beautiful but empty, and audiences stayed away in droves. It pulled in just $636,000 at the box office, not even enough to cover the catering bill. Coppola's Zoetrope Studios never recovered, drowning in debt and filing for bankruptcy twice in 3 years. The legendary director spent the next decade making movies just to pay off what he lost on this one flop. Critics were divided. Some praised its visual style, while others called it all flash and no substance. Pauline Kael famously wrote, "Coppola has spent so much time on the visuals he's forgotten to direct the actors." The real kicker? Coppola recently admitted that his next movie is, wait for it, another musical. He says he's going to make it on the cheap because after his recent Megalopolis flop, he's out of money. History doesn't just repeat itself, sometimes it rhymes. The Fall of the Roman Empire, 1964. This epic historical drama wasn't just a box office bomb, it killed an entire genre for decades. Producer Samuel Bronston went all in, building a massive 92,000 square meter Roman Forum set, the biggest outdoor film set Hollywood had ever seen. The production was record-breaking in every way, including how badly it flopped, with a budget of $19 million. The Fall of the Roman Empire needed to be a massive hit. Instead, it made back only about a quarter of its cost. Just 3 months after its release, Bronston's company went bankrupt. The film starred Sophia Loren, Alec Guinness, and James Mason, but even this all-star cast couldn't save it from disaster. The real tragedy is that it wasn't even a bad movie. Martin Scorsese actually defends it, calling it the poignant beauty of a lost art and the last great American epic before Hollywood decided these films were just too expensive to make. Its failure effectively wiped out the entire Roman epic genre. It would take Ridley Scott's Gladiator nearly 40 years later to bring ancient Rome back to the big screen in a commercially viable way. Bronston's ambition outpaced audience interest, and an entire production company crumbled like the empire it portrayed. Titan A.E. 2000. In the late 90s, Fox Animation had one big hit with Anastasia. They hoped to follow it up with Titan A.E., a bold sci-fi adventure that would cement them as serious competitors to Disney. Instead, it destroyed their entire animation studio. Before the movie even came out, Fox laid off 2/3 of its animation staff. That's how little faith they had in this project. And they were right. Despite having A-list voice actors like Matt Damon and Drew Barrymore, the film bombed hard, pulling in just $36.7 million against its $75 million budget. The film combined traditional 2D animation with early CGI, creating a visual style that was ambitious but couldn't hide its thin story and generic characters. Fox wasted little time in putting their animation studio out of its misery, shutting it down just 1 week after the movie's release. The irony? Fox Animation was developing another film when they closed shop, a little project called Ice Age that would later become a billion-dollar franchise when Blue Sky Studios took it over. Director Don Bluth, once Disney's greatest rival, never directed another theatrical film after this disaster. His last words on the project were telling, "We tried to do something different, and we got punished for it." The film has since become a cult classic, but that came too late for Fox Animation's employees, who all lost their jobs. Final Fantasy. The Spirits Within, 2001, Square Pictures attempted the impossible, creating the first photorealistic CGI humans in a feature film, and ended up committing financial suicide in the process. Based on the wildly popular video game franchise, this sci-fi adventure had the full backing of series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, who directed the film himself. The production was a technical marvel, with 200 people working for 4 years to create every hair, wrinkle, and facial expression on the virtual cast. The results were visually impressive for 2001, but the uncanny valley effect freaked audiences out. The soulless eyes of the characters just looked wrong. The movie cost a staggering $137 million to make, more than most live-action blockbusters at the time. It pulled in just $85 million worldwide, causing Square to lose an estimated $94 million. Roger Ebert actually praised the film, giving it 3.5 out of 4 stars and calling it a technical milestone, but general audiences weren't interested in milestone. They wanted entertainment. The disaster was so severe that it killed Square Pictures after just one film. It also delayed the planned merger between Square and rival game company Enix for years, as Enix executives got cold feet after seeing the financial damage. When the merger finally happened in 2003, the film division was completely scrapped. To this day, no other major video game company has attempted to create their own animation studio after seeing what happened to Square. Raise the Titanic 1980 producer Lou Grade once joked, "It would have been cheaper to lower the Atlantic than to raise the Titanic," and he wasn't kidding. Based on Clive Cussler's novel, ITC Entertainment sank $40 million into this disaster. Most of that money went into a massive scale model of the Titanic that they planned to dramatically lift from the ocean floor on camera. They built the model for $350,000, then realized it was too big for their water tank. So they spent another $6 million building a bigger tank. In the end, the entire production cost just $1 million less than building the actual Titanic back in 1912. And for what? The movie made a pathetic $7 million worldwide. Cussler was so furious about how the adaptation turned out that he refused to sell the film rights to any of his other Dirk Pitt novels for 20 years. When he finally relented, the result was Sahara with Matthew McConaughey, which he also hated. ITC Entertainment never recovered from the Titanic disaster. They had to sell off their distribution arm just to stay afloat, and eventually the company folded entirely. The model ship they spent millions on? It was eventually dumped in a lake on the back lot of a Maltese film studio, where it slowly rotted away, a perfect metaphor for the production company's fate. The Golden Compass, 2007. On paper, The Golden Compass looked like New Line Cinema's next Lord of the Rings trilogy. Based on Philip Pullman's best-selling His Dark Materials series, it had everything: talking animals, parallel worlds, and epic battles between good and evil. New Line went all in, spending a record $180 million to bring this fantasy to life. The film actually did decent business, pulling in $372 million worldwide. So why did it kill New Line? In a desperate move to finance the massive production, they sold off the international rights. When the movie made hundreds of millions overseas, New Line didn't see a dime of it. Domestically, it pulled in just $70 million, not enough to save them from financial ruin. Critics were mixed, and religious groups condemned it for its perceived anti-religious themes. Pullman's books are much more explicit in their criticism of organized religion. New Line had been planning a trilogy, but the controversy and financial disaster killed those plans instantly. The studio got hit so hard that they had to merge with Warner Brothers just to survive. After 4 decades as an independent powerhouse that had produced everything from Nightmare on Elm Street to The Lord of the Rings, New Line was essentially absorbed and gutted. HBO later adapted the full trilogy as a TV series, but for New Line the damage was already done. It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. This beloved Christmas classic was such a massive flop that it bankrupted the studio that made it. Liberty Films was founded by legendary filmmakers Frank Capra, William Wyler, and Samuel J. Briskin, with big dreams of creative independence. Their very first movie was It's a Wonderful Life, which cost $2.3 million to produce, a huge budget for 1946. When it hit theaters, audiences just didn't show up. The film barely made back $2 million, falling far short of breaking even. Critics at the time were lukewarm, with some finding it too sentimental. The New York Times called it a figment of simple Pollyanna platitudes. The public seemed to agree, preferring lighter fare after years of war-related hardship. Liberty Films couldn't weather the financial blow. Their initial plan to produce 15 pictures crashed and burned after just one failure. Facing foreclosure, the company had no choice but to sell its assets to Paramount Pictures and shut down. Here's the ironic twist. 30 years later, a clerical error pushed the film into public domain, meaning TV stations could air it for free every Christmas. That's how it finally found its audience and became the beloved classic we know today. Too late for Liberty Films, though. One box office bomb was all it took to end their Hollywood dreams. Mars Needs Moms. 2011 Disney has had some expensive misfires, but nothing compares to the catastrophe of Mars Needs Moms. This motion capture animated film cost a staggering $150 million to make and made just $39 million worldwide. That made it Disney's biggest financial loss ever at the time, with estimated damages of $136 million. The animation looked weird and uncanny. The story was forgettable, and the title was a marketing disaster. Producer Robert Zemeckis had just launched Image Movers Digital, his studio dedicated to performance capture animation, and this was supposed to be their flagship project. Instead, after Mars Needs Moms tanked, Disney pulled the plug on the entire studio, shutting it down after just 2 movies. Zemeckis, the visionary behind Back to the Future and Forrest Gump, saw his animation dreams crushed overnight. The film was so toxic that it killed other projects in development, including Zemeckis' planned 3D adaptation of the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. Critics were brutal. The Boston Globe called it creepy and said the characters looked like refugees from the video game The Sims, with blank, dead-eyed stares. Audiences clearly agreed, giving it the lowest opening weekend ever for a Disney film released in over 3,000 theaters. The performance capture technology that Zemeckis championed became a Hollywood punchline, and it would take years before the technique was used successfully in films like Planet of the Apes. The Right Stuff, 1983. Not all box office bombs are bad movies. The Right Stuff had everything going for it. A great director in Philip Kaufman, an incredible cast, including Sam Shepard and Ed Harris, and near-universal critical acclaim. It won 4 Oscars, got nominated for Best Picture, and even landed on Roger Ebert's list of the greatest movies ever made. and yet it still lost enough money to kill its studio. The Ladd Company was desperate for a hit after a string of flops. The Right Stuff was supposed to turn things around. It cost $27 million to make and ran over 3 hours long, a serious commitment for moviegoers. Despite all the awards and praise, it pulled in just $21 million, falling $6 million short of its budget. Roger Ebert loved this movie so much he actually put it right behind The Godfather on his list of great American epics. He called it a film that considers each scene as intently as an art film, and placed it alongside classics like Nashville and Apocalypse Now. But here's the difference. The Godfather is still talked about today, while The Right Stuff has faded into relative obscurity. The movie's failure was the final nail in the coffin for the Ladd Company. They briefly survived off the success of Police Academy, but shut down shortly after. Sometimes even making a masterpiece isn't enough to save a studio from financial ruin. Side Out, 1990. Aurora Productions started strong with the animated classic The Secret of NIMH, but after that it was one flop after another. By 1990, they were desperate for a hit, so they bet everything on a $6 million beach volleyball dramedy called Side Out. Yes, beach volleyball. The people behind this film truly believed they were onto something revolutionary. Director Peter Israelson was convinced that volleyball was about to explode in popularity, declaring, "When people see this movie, they'll get a sense of a new sport with fantastic athletes." Executive producer Jay Weston spent 6 years developing this movie, proudly stating, "Surfing was the sport of the 70s, volleyball is the sport of the 90s, and insisted that the timing of this movie is absolutely perfect." Turns out they drastically overestimated how much people cared about volleyball. The movie bombed spectacularly, bringing in just over $400,000. Aurora Productions immediately went under. Critics mocked the film mercilessly, with the Washington Post calling it as substantial as a sandcastle at high tide. The film starred C. Thomas Howell, fresh off his controversial role in Soul Man, and Peter Horton from 30-something, neither of whom could save this beachside disaster. Oddly, Side Out received a retro VHS Blu-ray release in 2022, proving that sometimes even the biggest flops can find a cult audience decades later. Too late to save Aurora Productions, though. Looney Tunes, Back in Action, 2003. Warner Brothers had a massive hit in 1996 with Space Jam, so naturally they thought they could do it again in 2003 with Looney Tunes Back in Action. It did not go as planned. This time the Looney Tunes were front and center. No basketball, no Michael Jordan, just straight-up cartoon antics mixed with live action, starring Brendan Fraser and Jenna Elfman. The film cost $80 million to produce, yet pulled in just $68.5 million worldwide. Warner Brothers immediately pulled the plug on their animation division. Joe Dante, who directed the film, later revealed the nightmare of making it. It was a pretty grim experience all around. The studio was divided on the movie, and the guy who was running the studio when it started wasn't there when we finished. The film had gone through countless rewrites and executive meddling. Warner Brothers Feature Animation had been developing several projects, including a Space Jam sequel and an adaptation of Cats Don't Dance, but after Back in Action bombed, they shut down the entire division. All ongoing projects were canceled, and the studio wouldn't attempt another major animation project until The Lego Movie in 2014. Critics actually liked the film more than audiences did. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars, praising its self-referential humor. But Warner Brothers wasn't laughing when their animation studio imploded over this costly misfire. Gods and Generals, 2003. Media mogul Ted Turner was so confident in this Civil War epic that he personally financed the entire $90 million production through his own Ted Turner Pictures. The prequel to 1993's Gettysburg starred Robert Duvall and Jeff Daniels and was directed by Ronald F. Maxwell. At 219 minutes long, that's over 3.5 hours, it was an endurance test even for the most dedicated history buffs. The film's first cut was over 5 hours long before being trimmed down, though a 280-minute director's cut was later released on DVD. Despite its historical accuracy and impressive battle sequences, audiences didn't show up. The movie made just $12.9 million at the box office, a catastrophic result that killed Ted Turner Pictures after just one film. Critics were brutal, with Entertainment Weekly calling it a lumpy 3.5-hour blob of Civil War history. The film was also criticized for its sympathetic portrayal of the Confederate side, with Roger Ebert noting it wavers between glorifying the idealism of both sides and condemning the horror of war. Turner had planned an entire Civil War trilogy, with the third film, The Last Full Measure, already in pre-production. After Gods and Generals bombed, the third film was immediately canceled and Ted Turner Pictures ceased to exist. Turner's dream of bringing the Civil War to the big screen cost him nearly $80 million in personal losses. Bangkok Dangerous, 2008. The Pang brothers' remake of their own 1999 Thai film seemed like a safe bet with Nicolas Cage in the lead role. Virtual Studios, riding high after successes like 300 and V for Vendetta, backed this action thriller about a hitman on one last job in Bangkok. With a budget of $45 million, it wasn't even that expensive by Hollywood standards. But from the moment it hit theaters, Bangkok Dangerous was DOA. It actually managed to hit #1 at the U.S. box office on its opening weekend, with the lowest total for a #1 movie in 5 years. Things only got worse from there as the film plummeted down the charts, barely scraping together $15 million domestically. International markets helped boost that to $42.5 million, but that still wasn't enough to cover its budget. Critics savaged the film, giving it a dismal 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. The New York Times called it a remake that, like many, feels more like a mechanical rehash than a creative rethinking. After this financial disaster, Virtual Studios decided to close its doors completely. The producers just walked away. Gone. For Nicolas Cage, it was just another forgettable entry in his direct-to-video period, but for Virtual Studios, it was the final nail in the coffin. Their last film became a trivia answer about the lowest-grossing #1 movie in modern history. The Rocker, 2008 Fox Atomic, was 20th Century Fox's attempt to tap into the youth market with edgy comedies and horror films. The Rocker, starring Rainn Wilson fresh off his success on The Office, was supposed to be their breakout comedy hit. Wilson played a failed drummer who gets a second chance at fame by joining his nephew's band. The film co-starred Emma Stone and Christina Applegate and only cost $15 million to produce, a relatively modest sum. But when it hit theaters in August 2008, The Rocker made a pathetic $2.8 million on its opening weekend, ranking number 12. By the end of its run, it had scraped together just $8.8 million worldwide, a financial disaster even for a low-budget comedy. This massive underperformance was the death blow for Fox Atomic. Critics were actually split on the film. Some praised Wilson's energetic performance, while others found the plot too derivative of School of Rock. But audiences simply didn't show up. Just months after The Rocker bombed, Fox Atomic released its remaining slate of 2 films in 2009 and then shut its doors permanently. Any projects still in development were transferred to the parent company, and the Fox Atomic brand was buried. The studio lasted just 3 years and produced only a handful of films before the rocker delivered the final blow. Wilson would later call it the most disappointing thing in my career. Hollywood throws billions at movies every year, but as we've seen, even the biggest studios are just one bomb away from bankruptcy. Which of these disasters surprised you the most? Were there any flops you actually enjoyed? Drop a comment below. Here's the real question though. In today's streaming-dominated world, are we witnessing the end of the studio-killing mega flop? Or with budgets now regularly exceeding $200 million, are we just setting the stage for even bigger financial catastrophes? Let me know what you think.